Can Iraq survive the escalating US-Israeli war on Iran? Being hit by both sides, Iraq's role in the conflict is growing. Attacks have targeted security forces, airports and oil fields, and they are becoming deadlier as the war drags on. With Baghdad struggling to maintain control across the country, can Iraq hold on, or is it on the brink of entering an even larger conflict? I'm Neil Harvey, and today's Newsmakers is Iraq. Iraq is increasingly taking centre stage in the war on its neighbour. This week, the US carried out deadly strikes on the Iran-backed coalition, the Popular Mobilisation forces. Since the war began, these Shia militias have targeted the US's embassy in Baghdad, its bases and US businesses across the country. Iraq's crucial oil money is also at risk. With the Strait of Hormuz blocked effectively, the country's lost its primary route for crude exports and production's plunged. So under pressure on multiple fronts, could Iraq's already fragile stability become a casualty of the war? Here's a closer look.
With the US-Israeli war on Iran raging, Iraq is increasingly becoming a battleground. On Wednesday, a US airstrike killed at least 7 fighters of the Popular Mobilisation forces in Iraq's Anbar Province. A day earlier, Washington struck the umbrella group for Iran-aligned Shia militias in that same province. It was the deadliest attack so far, killing 15 fighters.
This cowardly and treacherous attack is nothing but a means of pressuring us to lay down our arms, abandon our resistance, and leave our sovereignty and our country vulnerable to division and terrorist gangs. But never. We are the sons of the school of Imam Hussein, the master of martyrs. We will either fight and be martyred, or we will triumph, steadfast by God's will.
Meanwhile, an Iranian missile strike on a US base near Erbil airport in northern Iraq killed 6 Kurdish regional government security forces. According to the regional authorities, Iran admitted the attack was a mistake and is investigating the incident. The recent escalation prompted Iraq to summon the Iranian and US representatives to issue formal protests. On the ground, the PMF, which formerly falls under the Iraqi army, has been hitting US targets across the country since the war broke out. And on Tuesday, Iraq's National Security Council has formally given the group a green light to hit back against the US.
In light of the unjustified attacks and grave violations of Iraqi sovereignty, including the targeting of official security headquarters, the Council decided the following. Firstly, to confront and respond to military attacks carried out by military aircraft and drones targeting the headquarters and formations of the Popular Mobilization Forces Commission and other formations of our armed forces, using available means in accordance with the right to respond and self-defense.
That poses a serious challenge for Iraq's caretaker Prime Minister, Mohammed Shia al-Sudani, who tries to balance ties with Washington and the country's Shia factions. And amidst all the chaos in the region, Iraq is still trying to pick its next Prime Minister. The governing Shia coalition's nominee, former Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki, has faced strong opposition from Washington. The US President, Donald Trump, has accused Maliki of being too pro-Iran and threatened to cut all support to Iraq if he takes charge. Compounding the pressure, the energy crisis is straining the country's economic lifeline. Oil exports make up 90% of Iraq's budget revenues. With the Strait of Hormuz effectively closed and oil facilities under attack, a prolonged war could impede Baghdad's ability to pay civil servants, raising the risk of public unrest. Iraq is already grappling with internal divisions, economic hardship, and insecurity. And the war in the Middle East threatens to shake that fragile stability to its core.
Joining me now to discuss events in Iraq in greater depth, From Tehran is Iran foreign policy analyst Mohammad Khatibi. Welcome, Mohammad. First of all, I just want to get your assessment. How would you describe what is happening right now in Iraq? Iraqi territory is being struck from both sides of this conflict. Why?
So this is simple. The United States has bases there and other places in the region, including Qatar and UAE and Saudi Arabia, and the airspace and those bases have been used against the Iranian sovereign territory, and Iran is retaliating, and it's practicing its sovereign right, and it's practicing right to self-defense. This is why the Iraqi Iraqi bases there are being hit, and the United States is not just targeting Iran, but also Iran's allies in the region, including the Hashd al-Sha'bi, or the Popular Mobilisation units in the Iraqi sovereign territory. So the United States wants not only to attack Iran, but also Iranian allies. So the Israeli side also targets Hezbollah, which is a close ally to Iran in Lebanon, and this will not do any good because the Iranian side does not war in the first place, and it was the United States which carried out operations against Iran amid the ongoing negotiations in Geneva, and this ended diplomacy. And right now, Iran is practicing its right to self-defense, and Iran respects its neighbors' sovereignty and territorial integrity. But as long as these neighbors provide infrastructure, provide their sovereign territory to carry out operations against Iran, Iran will retaliate. And Iran still insists that it will not surrender because it resisted that month ago, and it sacrificed the leadership to not surrender, and it will not be okay with the maximalist demands by the United States. And recently we have been hearing that Iran rejected the peace initiatives by the United States because the United States administration continues its maximalist demands, and that means surrender from Iran, which is a red line.
I see your point, Mohammed. I really want to get us back to Iraq, though, here, because, I mean, you talked about Iran's allies. I mean, you're talking effectively, when you say Popular Mobilisation Forces, it's officially part of the Iraqi armed forces, but yes, with allegiance to Iran. Now, the United States forces have carried out strikes on them. How would you assess the strength of Iranian influence on Iraq's armed forces and also on its political establishment?
So Iran and Iraq have a really good relationship, and the PMF has a good relationship with Iran, but all Iran's regional allies act independently. As we have seen in the case of Yemen, Yemen has not entered the war yet, and it is acting independently based on its interests. So Ansarullah, so many people call it Houthis, are yet not entered the war because they are acting independently. That goes about the other allies of Iran, including Hezbollah and including the PMF in the Iraq. So each and every group aligned with Iran acts independently, and Iran has no complete say in their actions, as we have seen in many waves of escalation, and this is the situation right now. I think
Mohammed, you're making it sound as if they act completely independently here, but isn't Iran guiding their actions?
There is an axis, and the leader is Iran. However, this axis operates independently, but their movements and their actions are aligned with each other and based on their national interests. For example, in Hezbollah, they didn't enter the fight in previous rounds of escalation between Iran and Israel, but this time it is different. So the escalation and the tensions are really high, and it required Hezbollah, because of its survival and because of the support from Iran, to enter the equation. And right now, the Yemenis have decided not to enter at this stage. But if the United States carries out operations against Iran and tries and decides to capture Iranian islands and pressure Iran in the Strait of Hormuz, I think that the Yemenis will enter this equation and they will attempt to close the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, and that will put more pressure on the global economy. And the most important point here is that this war would have been avoided, and this is because of the United States, which started a war, an avoidable war against Iran. So the point here to end the war is respecting Iran's sovereign rights, respecting Iran's territorial integrity, and the decision of the Iranian people. So the United States
Mohammed,
wants
what
to
about
dictate
Iraq's
its
sovereign
will
territory
upon
and
Iranians.
its own sovereign integrity? Because it's finding itself almost pulled from both sides here. As I said, we see attacks coming both from the United States and from Iran. What do you think Iran's aim is here? Is it to cause disarray in Iraq, or does it want to force the US completely out of the country?
So it is upon the Iraqis to decide. Iran does not impose its will on neighbors, unlike the United States.
But it is launching drone attacks on Iraq.
People and leaders in different countries. So as I said, the Iraqi government unwillingly is providing its airspace because of the lack of air defenses to Israel, and the United States and Israel are carrying out operations from the airspace, using the airspace of Iraq to attack Iran. Also, the United States has bases in Iraq, and it is carrying out operations from there. And what do you expect from Iran? To sit and watch its civilian infrastructure, its military installations to be destroyed or retaliate? Iran was not attacking anyone in the region, including Iraq. And it was the United States and Israel which started this avoidable war. And until the time the United States and Israel continue this war, there will be war. And escalation means escalation. And that is not something irregular.
Mohammed, great to speak to you. Thanks so much. Mohammed Khatibi is my guest, Iran foreign policy analyst. Okay, let's talk about this further now and bring in our panel of guests. Joining me are from Stockholm, senior Iraq analyst at the International Crisis Group. That's Lahib Higel. From Madison, Wisconsin, in the US, veteran and former director of the Modern War Institute, retired Colonel Liam Collins. And from Waterloo, Ontario, international affairs and security analyst Shahram Khodi. Welcome to each and all of you. I want to come to you first, please, Lahib. What impact, because Iraq seems to have been dragged increasingly into this conflict, what impact would you say the war is having on the country?
Thank you, first of all, for having me. Yes, it's having a significant impact on the country. From day one, the US and Israel, alongside their strikes on Iraq, also targeted Iran-aligned groups. On Iran, they also targeted Iran-aligned groups inside Iraq. And these so-called resistance groups started responding immediately against US bases inside Iraq, and then eventually also on neighboring countries. And meanwhile, Iran has also been targeting Iraq, in particular the Kurdistan region, that not only hosts a US base in Erbil, but also Iranian Kurdish opposition groups that are located there and have been for decades. So Iraq is very mired in this. And as the war has escalated elsewhere, the Iran-aligned militias in Iraq have also expanded their strikes inside Iraq. So it's not only targeting military installations, it's also the infrastructure where foreign companies operate.
Okay, the signal was just freezing slightly there, but we got the bulk of your answer. I want to bring in Shahram here. So as as Lahib was explaining there, Iraq's found itself in a situation where its territory is being attacked by both sides in a conflict. How did it find itself in this situation?
Well, I think historically speaking, Iraq has been between the rock and a hard place since the rise of Daesh, since the rise of ISIS, which basically allowed in 2015, 2016, all these proxy militias that were created in the aftermath of the fall of Saddam Hussein by IRGC within Iraq as a response to the ongoing sectarian violence between the Sunnis and the Shia to supposedly protect the Shia against the Sunnis, to basically give some sort of a legal status as part of that paramilitary mobilization force. And they, of course, did their own bit significantly in the fight against ISIS, but they refused to be totally regulated by the Iraqi by the Iraqi state, and they, in a way, demanded to have the same powers and the status as the Kurdish Peshmerga, notwithstanding the fact that Iraqi Kurdistan has a special status in the Iraqi constitution. So this, of course, led to the fact that they did all manner of activities in support of the Islamic Republic, and many of them have either families in Iran, the commanders, or the IRGC commanders have relations in Iraq, either through second wives or third wives. And it is really intermingled, this situation between top IRGC brass in Iran and top command of various forces that are under the Iraqi paramilitary force, and which includes namely Hashd al-Shabi, Kataib Hezbollah, and the other forces. So Ayatollah Sistani, amongst all, has been massively critical of the activities of these forces, because in certain areas they have even taken over private land, private property of the people, harassing them, behaving in a mafia fashion, to the point that Ayatollah Sistani even sent his representatives to meet with the victims of the extrajudicial, extra-constitutional behavior of these forces. And Ayatollah Sistani even condemned them for their activities and demanded that there would be further regulation, bringing them under the auspices of the Iraqi armed forces completely. So, as a result,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, because I want to bring in Liam at this point. Colonel Collins, I mean, we've just heard from Sharam there, the kind of the close alignment between some of the military components in the Iraqi armed forces and Iran, and there are US assets on the ground. There are many, as I understand, several thousand US troops in Iraq. How vulnerable are those soldiers and the assets there?
Yeah, so there's about 2,500 US soldiers still in Iraq, all in Erbil, up in the Kurdistan portion of it. But first, it's important to remember why they are there, right? I mean, historically, right, the US deploys service members where they're most needed, and these are going to be high-risk locations. And so in this case, right, combating the Islamic State, countering Iranian influence, and securing regional stability. And so historically, right, you had to worry about ground attack for many decades. That was the biggest fear. But over the last decade or more, right, we had to worry about this air threat from drones, unmanned aerial systems, whatever you want to call them. And the counter unmanned aerial system or counter UAS threat has not kept pace with the attack capability. And so while there is some risk from that, this isn't a risk that just materialized on February 28th. It was known and considered when we first deployed them, when the U.S. first deployed them anywhere, that this might happen. So it's kind of they build this in from the onset that things can escalate, and they have plans in place, hardened bunkers. And so is there vulnerabilities? Yes, but that really hasn't changed. That was known when they deployed in the first place.
There's attacks, though, drone attacks coming from Iran, and attacks potentially coming now from the Popular Mobilisation forces, which have been given authorization to defend themselves and to fight back. I mean, is it a safe, a secure position, the US armed forces in Iraq, or could it actually come under threat completely?
I mean, without a doubt, there's always threat when they're deployed. And we've seen this right in Jordan a few years ago and other places in the region. And really the biggest vulnerability is the small attacks that happen from within the country, right? From these, what the U.S. has designated terrorist organizations or these Iranian-backed groups that Iraq harbors. That's the greatest threat. Anything coming from Iran, those are going to be typically larger aircraft that can be shot down. It's those smaller ones, less total, they're not as big of an attack, don't carry as much of a charge, but that's what is going to be the most threatening to these U.S. forces there.
Lahib, back to you. How much of a division is there within Iraq's political echelons? We know there's a divide within the armed forces, but how big overall is the divide? Is there a conflict here in politicians and in soldiers as to which side they support in this war?
Right. Well, can I just clarify first regarding the PMF, the Popular Mobilization Forces, or the Hashd al-Shabi? So, as was said before, this is an institution under the Iraqi state, nominally answering to the commander-in-chief, who is the prime minister. Within that umbrella, you have dozens of groups. Most of these groups are not in any way active in this war. They're carrying out regular duties across the country. A few of them that call themselves the resistance groups and that align with this regional axis of Iran are the ones that are carrying out these attacks. And these are the groups that the Iraqi state has struggled to it has worked out really well for them in the way that they are able the entire infrastructure of the Hashd throughout the country. And in doing so, they have attracted US strikes against the entire institution. And this is really what is causing the trouble for the Iraqi government to respond to. They condemn the US strikes, but they cannot really take action against them. They also don't want to antagonize the US too much, knowing they're carrying out attacks not only against military targets, but also diplomatic missions. And so the strange thing, when the Iraqi government earlier this week granted security forces the right to respond, it wasn't only for the PMF. It was for all Iraqi security forces, including the Peshmerga, that had been subjected to an attack from an Iranian missile that killed 6 Peshmerga. So yes, within the state there are a lot of divides, including within the Shia political establishment. But because this institution that is known to have fought ISIS is now under attack, there's not much that they can do in rhetoric to stop it. It looks like, and this is very much the narrative of the resistance groups, it looks like it's an attack on the Shia. So
can I bring you back to Shahram at this point, just to pick up on what you were saying there, Lahib. So Shahram, Lahib was saying that part of the decision coming from the Security Council of Iraq was to protect the civilians there. So you have foreign influence upon political appointments within Iraq. The US didn't want the returning prime minister. You've got influence within the armed forces coming from Iran. Does Iraq face an existential threat of its own here, the right of Iraqis to run their own country?
Well, it does. But the problem is that these supposed miniature groups, namely Hezbollah al-Nujaba, Harkat al-Hezbollah al-Nujaba, Kataib Sayyid Shohada, Kataib Imam Ali, these are, or even Asaib al-Ahl al-Haq, these are all, one way or another on the spectrum, very aligned with the IRGC. So the fact is that which civilian in Iraq, which civilian target in Iraq was targeted by Israel or the United States when they were attacking the Islamic Republic? None. It was these proxies that started attacking US bases it was these proxies that started attacking Iraqi Kurdistan. It was these proxies that attacked anybody that they regarded to be aligned with the United States and Israel in Iraq, as well as attacking, according to the reports of the Jordanian armed forces, attacking Jordan, attacking Kuwait, attacking half a dozen of their internal and external neighbors. So this places Iraq in a significantly precarious situation, because if these groups are attacked, then a vacuum will be created. For instance, there are Sunni groups that are just waiting in the wings in order to assert themselves in places like the Anbar Province. The problem is that Iraq has never had a proper central, powerful armed force to in order to assert its sovereignty because of ISIS, because of the manner by which Saddam Hussein was overthrown. And this long durée of instability has continued to date because of the multi-ethnic nature of this country did not allow it for it to have a proper centralized armed force and a sense, in my opinion, national unity. And I would blame it to a large extent the format of the federal constitution of Iraq that was developed between 2003 to 2010.
Sorry to say we're going to have to wrap it up there. Thank you so much to each of you, my guests, Lahib Higel, Colonel Liam Collins and Sharam Koldi. And thank you to all at home for watching us. Always appreciated. Remember, you can follow us on social media and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Neil Harvey. See you next time.